All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of Misplaced. For those of you that haven't tuned in before, Misplaced is a series about food systems, problems in the food systems, and solutions. We talk to entrepreneurs, advocates, and experts about solutions to issues of sustainability and food, and not only. So today is episode 16. We have 4+1 episodes to go, which we're really excited about, and we can't believe we got this far in the series. And the guest speaker for today is also the last speaker of our Tiny Insect Allies mini series within Misplaced, where we spotlight experts and entrepreneurs and advocates that have solutions to sustainability that are related to insects. So I am really, really excited to have today with us Dr. Amy Franklin. Hi, Amy. Thanks for tuning in all the way from the US.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We're really excited to have you. So Amy founded Farms for Orphans with an aim to ensure that vulnerable children have a sustainable source of nourishment. Farms for Orphans works to alleviate food insecurity, malnutrition, and poverty in orphaned and street children in the Democratic Republic of Congo through the power of insects, among other smart farming methods. And so we're really excited to hear about Amy and Farms for Orphans' work. Before Amy starts, I'd like to remind the audience to please ask your questions. You can use the chat or you can use the comment function depending on where you're tuning in from. After 15 minutes of telling her story, Amy is going to address your questions with us. So without further ado, Amy, please feel free to start sharing your story with us.
All right. Well, let me share my screen with you all.
All right. You're all set, Amy. Thanks.
All right. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be speaking to you today or tonight, wherever you are in the world, about the role that insect farming can play in providing food security, improved nutrition, and livelihood opportunities to vulnerable populations. Let me start my slideshow. So a little bit about me. I'm a veterinarian and a beekeeper from Colorado. Here in the States, I have a honeybee veterinary medicine practice. I am founder of the nonprofit Farms for Orphans, which you'll be hearing about today. And my most favorite job in the world is being a mommy to the 3 little munchkins in the top left photo. So 2 of my children are from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is a country located in Central Africa, and the DRC is one of the poorest and most food insecure countries in the world. Only 9% of the population consumes a minimum acceptable diet. Over 11 million children are chronic or acutely malnourished. 43% children under the age of 5 years are stunted, and micronutrient deficiencies are pervasive. There was a study published in 2017 about the cost of hunger in Africa, and the authors of this study reported that the cost of child malnutrition in the DRC is 1.7 billion USD annually. So it's a significant burden to the country's economy. The DRC has a very young population, and 70% of the country's working age youth are unemployed. There's a continuous influx of young people from rural areas into the cities. And currently 43% of the population lives in urban areas, with the 3 largest cities being Kinshasa, capital of the DRC, Lubumbashi, and Bushmeat, where they're from. The severity of poverty and food insecurity quite astounding, considering how rich the country is in terms of natural resources. This line of the Congo Basin, and 65% of the Congo Basin's forests are within the DRC. This is the second largest contiguous rainforest in the world, and it's a huge carbon sink and biodiversity hotspot. And the biggest threat to the Congo Basin, the clearing of land for agriculture and for livestock rearing. So it was through our adoption process that I saw firsthand the poor nutritional status of children, particularly of orphans in this country, and the impoverished conditions that orphaned and street children exist under. It's not at all uncommon for children to receive one meal a day and go for several weeks or even months with no protein at all in their diet. Malnourished kids have delayed physical and cognitive development, and this limits these kids their whole lives. Malnutrition also affects their immune function. In fact, 45% of child deaths worldwide are linked to malnutrition. When my kids first came home from the Congo, they were so small for their age, they weren't on US growth charts. But with good nutrition, our son grew 7 inches, I grew 5 inches their first year home. And today they're happy, healthy, thriving, and just so full of potential. It was knowing these statistics and watching my own kids grow and thrive with good nutrition. It really moved me to do something for kids in this country. And so I founded the nonprofit Farms For Orphans in 2015, aim of helping orphanages and vulnerable women and youth to grow their own protein and nutrient-rich food. As a veterinarian, I plan to do this through small-scale livestock production, but I quickly learned that most orphans in Kinshasa, where our operations are based, have no land. They're literally surrounded on all sides by concrete. So they have no option to grow a garden or to raise livestock. And this is a photo of one of the orphanages that we work with. And this block of cement is their only outdoor space. And this lack of space is pretty typical for most households throughout the city. Kinshasa is considered a mega city. It's the third largest city in Africa with a population of 15 million and a projected 2050 population of 35 million. So this human congestion is only going to increase. Half the cities from neighboring provinces, and climate change has led to lower crop yields, and it's really been affecting the city's food supply. So food is very, very expensive in Kinshasa. A lot of people do grow crops where they can find small plots of suitable soil, but overcultivation within and surrounding the city has really created extensive soil erosion. So most of the population relies on non-fortified staple crops like cassava that are really lacking in nutrition, but they do grow well in poor soils. And as the population grows and the city's demand for food increases, this is undoubtedly going to put more pressure on the Congo Basin's forests. So I really wanted to focus our efforts on growing a low carbon producing that was highly nutritious, that was also resilient to the effects of climate change, could be grown by urban orphanages, and was environmentally sustainable. And I can't think of very many livestock or vegetable crops that really fit the bill. So in my research, I came across an article about insect consumption in the Congo, and my mind was blown. I had no idea that insects were such a popular food in the DRC. And the more I learned, the more I became convinced that farming insects in orphanages could help improve nutrition, alleviate food insecurity. So in 2007, our mission became to alleviate poverty, food insecurity, and malnutrition in orphaned and street children through the introduction of climate-smart farming methods that preserve indigenous traditions of consuming wild harvested insects while creating livelihoods for vulnerable populations. That's kind of a mouthful. Basically, we're focused on farming at this point in time anyway, the African, known in the local language as impose, palm weevil larvae are a traditionally wild harvested insect that is consumed by the majority of the inhabitants of the Congo Basin. They're extremely nutritious and they have a really high market value. So we're providing training, farming materials, and ongoing mentorship in palm weevil farming to institutions that care for vulnerable kids like orphanages and halfway houses, as well as to women and youth farmer cooperatives. So one of my favorite things to do in Kinshasa is to go to the markets, and wild harvested food insects are everywhere. And this video shows some of the more popular insects that are sold. Of the 24 or so extant insect orders, 5 insect orders are clearly preferred as a food source. 4 of those are represented here. All I'm really missing in this video is a representative from the order Hymenoptera, which are the bees, wasps, and ants, which are also eaten in the Congo. I just didn't happen to get them in this video clip. So as you've probably gathered, the DRC is one of the most active countries in Africa in terms of entomophagy, or the consumption of insects, and the diverse number of species that are eaten. But insects are really consumed throughout tropical and subtropical regions of the world. Mexico, Thailand, and China, for example, are very active and consume a wide variety of insect species. You can see that North America and Europe are pretty gray, and we look at insect consumption with disgust and consider insects as a poor man's food. Someone once commented on one of our social media posts that what we were doing was disgusting and disgraceful, and that we should be doing better by these kids. But people in the West really don't understand that where entomophagy is prevalent, insects are eaten for their taste, for their nutritional content, and in many instances, they're considered a delicacy. In the Congo, insects are more expensive than other available proteins. In fact, the most expensive protein you can buy at a market in Kinshasa is crickets. Of course, what I really appreciate about insects is how nutrient dense they are. Species for which there are data show that many are rich sources of protein and fat and micronutrients. We ran a nutritional analysis on our farmed palm weevil, as well as on wild harvested larvae from the purchase from the market. And we found that they had almost identical nutritious profiles despite having different diet. And in general, they're excellent sources of protein and micronutrients. Iron deficiency anemia is a huge problem in the demographic with whom we work. And a 100-gram serving of palm weevil larvae can provide the daily iron requirement for children. So insects have a lot of potential to improve nutrition, ameliorate micronutrient deficiencies. The vast majority of edible insects sold in markets throughout Central Africa are wild harvested, and the collection and sale of forest products, including insects, is primarily carried out by women, youth, and indigenous people, providing them with important livelihood opportunities. But this is only a part-time activity due to the seasonal availability of insects. So for example, the collection and sale of palm weevil grubs provides supplemental income for many people in the Congo Basin. In 2004, in Cameroon, the average monthly income for rural palm weevil collectors was between $50 and $70 USD. In 2015, the figures were much higher, monthly income ranging from $180 to $600 USD. And remember, this is a seasonal income, so about 6 months out of the year. So this is pretty significant considering that in 2000, the average annual income in Cameroon was just over $1,300 USD. Income generated through the palm weevil trade is higher than their income sources. For example, these figures are all for 2015, by the way. Coffee producers averaged about $50 per month. Bushmeat harvesters averaged $58 per month, and rattan collectors averaged about $26 per month. Okay, so now I'm going to talk more specifically about farming insects. Although they are a popular food throughout Central Africa, they are not widely farmed. And one of the greatest advantages of farming insects, I think, that it can provide communities a consistent year-round supply of insect protein and reduce pressure on wild populations, because the continued wild harvest of burgeoning human population is just not sustainable. I speak to the DRC, but there's very little regulation concerning the collection of insects, and many species have experienced significant population declines from overharvesting. Not all harvesting techniques are sustainable. This is a photo of a palm weevil harvest, and what collectors will do is go into the forest and cut these large swaths of raffia palm habitat, and it's the decaying palm tissue that attracts the adult palm beetles, which will lay their eggs in the raffia tissue. And then the larvae hatch out of the eggs and feed on the raffia tissue. And when they're large enough, the collectors will come back and gather them. So farming insects can address some of the major challenges encountered with wild harvesting, including seasonal and variable harvests, sustainability issues of wild harvesting, as well as hazardous working conditions. Collectors can spend days to weeks in the forest, and they're cutting down large trees using basic tools, and they have no protective equipment. I think the one man in the front is actually in his bare feet. Insect farming is more efficient than traditional livestock rearing. Our indoor vertical farms allow us insects in a small space. Insects produce lower amounts of greenhouse gas emissions and environmentals like ammonia, which leads to acid rain and acidification of ecosystems. And our indoor farms are more resilient to the effects of climate change, such as drought and adverse weather events that affect traditional agricultural systems. And compared to livestock rearing, insect rearing requires much less water, and they're more efficient at converting feed to meat. For example, 45 kilograms of feed, 0.5 kilograms of beef, while the same amount of feed yields 20 kilograms of cricket. And insects can transform low-value organic byproducts into a high-quality food or feed. Wild harvesting insects is an activity carried out by rural populations, but insect farming can be practiced in both rural and urban landscapes. And it provides people the ability to make a living wage safely and with dignity that is also environmentally sustainable. I'm sure you've all heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals adopted by the United Nations as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So this means that all people living on Earth have the ability to provide for themselves in such a manner that's viable in the long run while maintaining the healthy functioning of the Earth's ecosystems. And I think that insect farming is one of the greenest livelihoods out there. And I would argue that it can contribute to multiple sustainable development goals. So whether insects collected from the wild or they're farmed, they're used for home consumption and can be sold for income at local markets, to restaurants and grocers, as well as to middlemen operating in distant markets. But farming insects provides a variety of additional income generating activities, and I'm always looking for ways for our farmers to increase their income. With our partners at the University of Kinshasa, we're just now beginning to look at how we can incorporate our spent breeding beetles into a poultry or fish. And producing a fertilizer from insect frass and farm waste is of great interest to us. This can allow urban gardens to improve their soil and increase their production and grow a larger variety of nutritious foods. Farms for Orphans was recently invited by the Wildlife Conservation Society to participate in a bushmeat demand reduction program. If you're not familiar with the term bushmeat, this is to meat from wildlife that is illegally hunted for human consumption. And so we're promoting insects as a healthy alternative to bushmeat to consumers in Kinshasa. And this year, beginning in July, Farms for Orphans is going to begin training women from communities surrounding the Okapi Wildlife Reserve in eastern DRC how to farm palm weevil larvae. The reserve is home to endangered okapis, elephants, leopards, chimpanzees, crocodiles, just to name a few species that are all unfortunately species that are regularly sold in bushmeat markets through Central Africa. So our goal is to provide them a protein-rich food and income-generating activity to help decrease their reliance on bushmeat. And I should also point out that the bushmeat trade isn't confined to Africa. Globally, this is a multi-million-dollar industry. Every year, huge quantities of bushmeat are imported into Europe and the US from Central African countries, primarily for the African diaspora, and bushmeat is sold at prices at the top of the range. I read a paper about the bushmeat trade, and the authors reported that the consumption of bushmeat is really culturally driven by the desire for these communities to remain connected to their countries of origin. But I really think that insects could fill this need. So I've been presenting everything that's great and wonderful about insects. Obviously, there are many challenges that have yet to be addressed for the long-term success of the sector. There's an overwhelming lack of knowledge on basic questions such as the most suitable species to farm, their housing and feed requirements, and humane harvesting techniques. The high cost of feed is an issue in some farming systems, and sourcing feeds that are free of pesticides and toxins can be challenging. In any farming system where there are a large number of animals in close proximity to one another, there's the potential for disease outbreaks. And we saw this in the cricket industry with the denzovirus. Many insects that we're now beginning to farm, we don't know what potential pathogens are lurking until the entire herd is wiped out. Obviously, we need to be practicing good biosecurity farms. We need to identify appropriate therapeutics to treat disease outbreaks, as well as their safety and withdrawal times to avoid chemical residues in the final food product. And this is a whole area of research that needs to be addressed. Farming non-native insects can lead to the introduction of invasive species that can escape and wreak havoc on the system. This is why Farms for Orphans focuses only on farming native species to the Congo. And then there's a need to raise awareness of the great potential of the edible insect sector among policymakers to promote and guide future development and channel funding research that we need so desperately. I believe that insect farming can provide a nutritious food for growing children, the means for vulnerable people to earn a living wage safely and with dignity. And when people can make a living wage, families are fed and stay together, and people live more productive lives. You know, through my work, I've had the privilege of working with many smart, motivated, entrepreneurial-minded women, but they've historically had very little support and training and capital. And my organization is working really to change this. So I hope that my talk got you excited about insect farming and the edible insect industry. And my question to you is, where will you get involved? So thank you for this opportunity. You can reach out to me with any questions, and I invite you to join us on social media, see what we're up to, and follow us. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amy, for this presentation. It was really, really interesting, and I've learned quite a few new things. Of course, I'm not an expert on African countries, so it was great to hear about the Republic of the Democratic Republic of Congo reality. So really, congratulations on all the nice work that you're doing. And I know that there are already a couple of questions coming through. So if you don't mind, we'll start from there, if that's okay.
Sure.
We have Wendy asking, how many farms does Farms for Orphans have in the DRC? Are the farms selling the palm weevil larvae and or mostly feeding the kids at the orphanages?
Yes, so we have trained 5 orphanages with over 1,200 children in their care, and we've trained 1 youth cohort. We don't dictate what the orphanages do with the larvae. They're really yummy, so I don't blame them if they want to eat them. It makes more sense to me that the orphanages would sell the larva because they can get a really good price for it, and then buy a much, much larger quantity of a protein like fish or chicken. And some of the orphanages have done that. As far as selling the palm weevil larva, yes, orphanages do sell just to help, maintain the farms and pay for feed costs and things of that nature.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And how involved are the kids themselves, or is it mostly the staff members in the orphanages that take care of the farms? Because it seems like a good learning opportunity for the kids as well.
Right. So we do train the orphanage staff, and we invite any youth that are interested to participate. And we've actually had quite a few youth that are participating in the farming process. We found it's much better to have several farmers so that, if the kids are at school, then the staff can take care of the farm. And it's really pretty low tech and a low time commitment. They only spend about an hour to 2 hours a day caring for the farm, really depending on the size of the farm.
Yeah, definitely the convenience seems like an appeal to it for sure. Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to touch upon something that you mentioned on, the Western world mindset and attitude towards edible insects. You told the story of this comment on how someone felt like you weren't doing right to the kids by feeding them insects, etc. So I guess then my question goes on to how does it affect the support that you get for Farms for Orphans, for example, in terms of donations and the like? So, sorry, to summarize the question, I guess the question is, where does most of the support come from, right, for Farms for Orphans? And you gave us some ideas on how we can get involved, and feel free to emphasize those. And I'd like also to know who collaborates with you. We heard about the university, of course, and Wildlife Fund as well. But who helps you on the ground? Maybe find the right orphanage and implement this system.
So that I'm not sure which question to answer first. We have a team on the ground.
A lot. Yeah, let's start with the Western mindset.
We have a team on the ground that's based in Kinshasa, and they actually go to the orphanages, they interview them, they make sure they are a legitimate registered orphanage with the government, because there's so many orphanages in the DRC and a lot of them aren't registered. So we only want to work with registered orphanages. We look to see how much space they have. We invite them to our research farm in Kinshasa to learn the process and make sure it's something that they want to become involved in, because it is expensive to get an orphanage farm up and running, and we found that they need a lot of support to get them going. So it's not like we train them and then never see them again. I mean, it's an on process. Our primary farm, our research farm, is at the Congolese Ministry of Health, their Institute for Biomedical Research Complex in the Gombe district of Kinshasa. So we with the Ministry of Health. Our other partners are the University of Kinshasa, St. Dominic University. We are starting to work with the Congolese Women in Business Association. They're very interested in training vulnerable women in Kinshasa how to farm palm weevil larvae as well. And then, as I mentioned, the Wildlife Conservation Group. Trying to think what other partners we have. I think those are the primary ones. Most of our donations do come from the public. Luckily, those comments expressing disgust with what we're doing are few and far between. There are a lot of great organizations out there, like Joseph Yoon from Brooklyn Bugs, that are out there promoting edible insects to the West as, a delicious and beautiful food. And he provides these gorgeous presentations of insects that, make you want to eat them. I also spend the majority of my time, of course, applying for grants. So primarily donations and grants from foundations is what keeps us going.
Thanks. So thanks for addressing my many questions all at once.
I think I got all of them. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got all of them. Thank you so much. Good memory. I have some more questions actually coming through from our audience. So we have a question from Chloe. Why are people interested in the bushmeat trade? And sometimes people would consider the hygiene of insects rearing. How can you explain that to them? Okay, so maybe again, two questions. Maybe let's start with the bushmeat trade. I guess I had this question as well. If edible insects are pretty common, like you mentioned in the DRC, then why is there a preference for bushmeat?
The bushmeat industry is driven a lot by the urban population as well as internationally. A lot of people in the US and Europe that consume bushmeat are originally from Africa, and that's a way that they can feel connected to their culture. So I guess that's why it's such a huge industry. I'm not sure I entirely answered that question for you.
Yeah, so locally in the DRC, is there a preference for bushmeat as well compared to insects?
It's another just part of the culture. It's something that is available in all of the markets, and I don't think there's a preference for bushmeat over insects, but we are, trying to educate people about the bushmeat industry and how, it's affecting their native wildlife. And, a lot of the species in the bushmeat trade are endangered, and just, educating people that they're worth more alive than they are dead, pretty much.
Yeah.
Insects can be a good sustainable alternative to bushmeat.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and so I guess the second part of the question, which was interesting, you talked about the challenges of rearing insects and the hygiene and the diseases. So what are some of the measures that you suggest to orphanage staff members and the youth when you train them on farming to maintain hygiene in a basically almost home growing context, right? Because it's not an industrial or like a professional side. Yeah. So what are some main things that you
provide training in farm biosecurity, and we actually provide all of our farmers with the materials they need, like latex gloves and masks, things to cover their hair. We supply them with hand sanitizer and bleach to clean all of the equipment between insect generations. Just having them very familiar with their herd and what a healthy herd looks like, so that they can quickly identify any problems in the herd and then quarantine any insects that don't appear well. We also warn them about adding insects that they purchase from the market into their herd on the farm, because they could be introducing potential pathogens. Controlling rodents, controlling flies with fly tape, rodent traps. We provide all of that for our farmers to, just basic hygiene and just trying to control pests on the farm is a big part of the training that we provide for our farmers.
Sure, makes sense. And I'm assuming they can stay in touch with you throughout the process, like communicate through pictures maybe and things like that to monitor the colonies.
The orphanages, yes. That our staff in the DRC visit the orphanages on a regular basis to see how things are going and to provide more mentorship and support and answer any questions that they have. So we are very, very involved in the farms.
Awesome. Okay, and then I think we can probably take just one last question because we are a little bit over time. You talked about the seasonality of the wild harvesting and how farming actually can kind of address that and solve it. Does the farming change much across the season to adjust to the climate? Or is it as simple as just having the farms indoors and they can run equally throughout the summer and the winter, for example?
Yeah, we haven't had any problems in our indoor farms. We're farming them year round. And actually, right now, palm weevil larvae are pretty difficult to find in the market because they're moving into the dry season. So there's a lot of demand for the farmed larvae at this time.
So it's a great opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Great opportunity for farmers. Fantastic. Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your story, for answering all our questions. And I think we need to bring the episode to a conclusion because we're a little bit over time, but I really, really enjoyed it and I can see the audience did too. I know some of you were asking to get the presentation or the recording. So I just want to emphasize you can find the recording of Amy's episode on all our social medias and YouTube. So whatever channel you are tuning in from now, except for Instagram, you'll find this video again on there. So yeah, we hope that you'll rewatch it and share it. And I'm going to bring the episode to a conclusion and just say that we'd like to hear your feedback. So please do fill out the feedback form that is in the description of this episode. You also stand a chance to win a gift card by participating this way. And please do tune in next week on Tuesday for a special extra episode that we scheduled recently where we spotlight a student initiative with 2 IB students from Korea from Branksome Hall, Asia. So we're really looking forward to seeing you all again next week. Once again, thank you so much, Amy, for being with us today.
You're welcome. And thank